Hi there, my name's Simon Drew, and welcome to the Practical Stoic Podcast, where I give you practical Stoic advice for modern times. You can support the show by going to patreon.com/Simon Drew. I also do one-on-one mindset coaching, and you can book in your first free consultation by going to risetothegoodlife.com/coaching. On Facebook, you can join my group, the Practical Stoic Mastermind. But for now, enjoy this episode. Hi there, my name's Simon Drew, and welcome to the Practical Stoic Podcast. I think that it's really important to talk about the people who inspire us. The Stoics often talked about the importance of mentors and positive examples. In fact, Marcus Aurelius placed a special emphasis on those who inspired him by starting his meditations with a list of people and what they had taught him about life and how to live it. By talking about those who have positively impacted us, we are better able to embody the principles that they lived by, and that in turn enables us to potentially be impactful in the lives of other people as well. So this week, I'm really excited to hear from our listeners about the people who have directly or indirectly impacted their lives in positive ways. And I'll start with Dan Monks, who said, "My father taught me to approach the world in a serious manner, that men do their duty, even if it isn't fun or easy. He taught me that people that have an outward appearance that differed from my own were of equal value to me, and that people should be respected according to their virtue, rather than the size of their bank account or their social position. He is a man of few words, but he exemplifies proper behavior through his own actions. My father isn't a Stoic practitioner, but his example provided an operational framework that made my adoption of Stoicism natural and simple. Like all fathers and sons, we've had our rough patches. That's part of the process of young men breaking away and becoming independent. But looking back, I now realize how fortunate I was to have him." So Dan, thank you so much for that response, and I can tell how important your father was to you, and you make a good point there. We often don't realize how influential someone has been in our lives until we look back on our life and see that even though we did have those rough patches, they still had a massive impact on the person who we were going to become. So I think it's a really great mindset to look back on that and recognize that fact. And so thank you so much for that answer again. And moving on, we had an answer from Allison, and she said, "Darren Brown has had a massive impact on me because of his book, Happy, Why More or Less Everything is Absolutely Fine. This book led me to Stoicism, which has had a positive impact on my outlook and therefore my life." So Alison, thank you so much for that answer, and I believe we've had it recommended a couple of times that we have Darren Brown on the podcast, so I will absolutely get onto that because it sounds like he is having a really positive impact on many people's lives. And so our next answer comes from Timothy, and he said, "My father had the most positive impact on my life. He never cut his conscience to fit the year's fashion. He was a child of the greatest generation, a World War II naval aviator, a senior partner in a law firm, and a great guy. He had 5 children, and I am sure that all of my brothers and sisters would agree. I remember when America was involved in the Vietnam War, and my oldest brother was about to be drafted. My father was planning to send my brother to Canada to avoid serving in the war. Apart from believing that Ho Chi Minh was a Vietnamese nationalist rather than a communist, my father told me regarding his plans to send my brother to Canada, 'Timothy, anyone who has ever fought in a war would never want their sons or daughters to fight in one.'" So thank you so much for that response, Timothy. I really appreciate that, and it sounds like your father was an incredible person who did have a really positive impact in your life. So thank you again. And our next answer came from Talk, and he said, "Oddly enough, I cannot point to any one person. My parents did what they could to instill morals, manners, wisdom, and knowledge, most of which I learned more by overhearing than actual teaching. The rest of my influences come from life experience, a motley crew of people, ancient worldviews, and my own critical thinking. I've made my parents proud of who I have become, so I have to be doing something right." So Talk, thank you so much for that answer, and I agree, sometimes it's hard to think of just one person who has influenced us. I realize that it's a limiting question, but sometimes we can just recognize that our life and who we are is a representation of every person we've known and every experience we've had. So I absolutely agree with you there. So thanks for that answer. And moving on, we had a response from Matthew, who said, "Without a doubt, the answer is my mother. She has been my rock, my sounding board, my inspiration, my caretaker, my spiritual guide, and has been there for me whenever I needed, even with all of the things I have put her through over the years. Always positive, always attentive, always courageous, and I could not ask for anything more. Without her, I wouldn't be the man I am today." So Matthew, thank you so much for that response. It absolutely sounds like your mother has been a firm foundation in your life. So thank you again. And the next answer comes from Andrew, who said, "Marcus Aurelius has been incredibly influential to me for rehabbing me back to civilian life after the Air Force, and my father for always being a good man without trying." So Andrew, thank you so much for that answer. And our next response comes from Tony, who said, "Jocko Willink has been really inspiring to me. He is constantly improving himself in all areas of his life, and his extreme ownership approach is an aggressive version of the dichotomy of control." So Tony, I absolutely agree. Jocko Willink has been a really inspiring person to many, many people. And I think that the message that he preaches, which is that taking personal responsibility in every area of your life is the way forward, it's so important. It's such a simple message, but it really needs to be heard by so many more people. And so I'm grateful for that answer. Thank you so much. And moving on, our next answer came from Reese, who said, "Can we have fictional characters? If so, mine would be Samwise Gamgee from Lord of the Rings. His speech to motivate Frodo still inspires me to this day and has some Stoic principles to it." So Reese, absolutely we can have fictional characters, and I appreciate the different twist on the question, so thank you so much for that. And our next response comes from Leo, who said, "Albert Ellis, who is one of the founders of cognitive behavioral therapy, has been extremely influential in my life. Ellis credited the teachings of Epictetus in influencing the formulation of CBT. A fascinating person, and I highly recommend reading his books." So Leo, thank you so much for that answer. And, I find it really fascinating how much Stoicism has actually influenced so many modern practices that we have today and so much of our modern lives. It really is one of the original philosophies of personal development and personal growth and as you say, cognitive behavioral therapy. It's really amazing. So thank you so much for that answer. And moving on, we had a response from Gunnar, who said, "Tim Ferriss has been really influential to me. Discovering the Tim Ferriss Show and the 4-Hour Workweek has helped me to discover this wonderful philosophy, and ultimately it has guided me to this wonderful group of individuals. Tim, along with the guests on his show, have inspired me to always push myself to become the person that I want to become." So Gunnar, thank you so much for that answer. I couldn't agree more. Tim Ferriss has been a guiding light in many areas of my life, and including Stoicism. He is the person who I was first introduced to Stoicism through when he recommended the Letters from a Stoic. So I couldn't agree more. Thank you so much for that answer. And our second last answer comes from Joanne, who said, "The person who has influenced me the most is a man who I only knew as David, who for nearly a decade I saw for short periods on dog walks. He said very little, but what he said and his demeanor made me want his peace. 2 years ago, I plucked up the courage to ask him out, and I have been learning how to find peace ever since, both from him and my own studies." So Joanne, thank you so much for that. That is an awesome story, and I really appreciate you sharing that with us. I think it's so wonderful how people can just kind of fall into our lives and have such a massive impact. So thank you again for sharing that. And our final answer comes from Jeremy, who said, "I had a history teacher in high school named Mr. Corsale. He was one of the most relatable and easy to get along with teachers I ever had. He was the most even-keeled person I'd ever met, and I didn't know about Stoicism at the time, but I'm 100% convinced he was a Stoic practitioner. He never got mad or upset about anything in his classroom, which seemed impossible with the students at my school. His attitude and persistence to teach us something of value every day was amazing, and it's something I'll never forget. I never really had an interest in history, but he taught us, well, those of us who were paying attention, to try and imagine being in the shoes of the people we were studying. He always wanted us to understand that we were all studying real people who struggled with the same human problems we deal with today. It helped me to understand the value of the past and how much we can learn from our ancestors. He was a great role model, and he was way overqualified to be at my school, but I'm thankful that he was. So Jeremy, thank you so much for that response. You know, teachers can be some of the most influential people in a person's life because that's such an important time in our lives when we're growing and developing and really learning about the world. So they really can have that impact, and it sounds as though this teacher was an incredibly positive influence in your life. So thank you so much for sharing that. And that actually concludes all of the answers from you guys today, and I really want to thank you so much for really putting in the effort every week to share your experiences and share these people who have been really influential in your life, because I think it's so great that we can come together as a Stoic community here and share our ideas and our thoughts and share things that are really important to us. I think that's really important. So thank you again to all of you. And to everybody who's listening to the podcast, I would encourage you this week to think about those people who have been so important in your life, so important to your own development, your own growth, to the person who you have become. Because none of us get through life alone. There are always people who help us on our journey to become the best versions of ourselves that we can possibly be. So, you know, think about that. Think about those people and maybe even share your gratitude with them. If they're still in your life right now, do what you can to reach out to them and let them know that they've been such a positive person in your life. I think that if you do that, it'll be a really positive experience for you. But anyway, that's the episode for today, and I really hope that you've gotten a lot of value out of it. And look, I'll talk to you next time, but until then, I hope that this episode has helped you on your rise to the good life. Ciao. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Practical Stoic Podcast. I hope it's been valuable for you. And if you'd like to support the show, then you can go to patreon.com/Simon Drew. If you'd like to try mindset coaching with me, then you can book your first free consultation by going to risetothegoodlife.com/coaching. To join the community, just go to Facebook and search for the Practical Stoic Mastermind. The links to all of these places are included in the show notes, but for now, this is Simon Drew signing out.